You shown. So it is very lovely to see people here this evening. Um, like I said in my little description of this, I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. So this isn't a precursor to any kind of course or anything. It's just a response to a request. I wrote a post a little while ago about my horse Rural. It's actually my youngest horse and also my biggest horse. And I was describing how he's had a very serious accident last year, and has been out of ridden work ever since. And so, as I've started to think about bringing him back into training, um, let me just make sure my own phone is turned off. That'd be a shocker, wouldn't it? I brought with me a very different viewpoint because I had no um I had no time pressures on me. I'm just checking. Can you see those people that are trying to get in, Shona? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, no, I am. I'm admitting all this just about like
Brilliant. Thank
10
you so much.
seconds
Thank
in.
you. Okay, cool. So what happened was my young horse had an injury and had quite a bit of time off, and then we regrouped. And I wrote this post about how through this process, I became much more aware of some things that I had been living with because of other things that I wanted to do, which was basically to ride my horse. And I wasn't doing anything terrible, but I described, by any means, people who know him, seen him, he's a perfectly happy chap. But there were some things that I was doing that I described as papering over the cracks. And a couple of people said, "What do you mean? And can you talk to us about that? And would you be able to put on some kind of webinar?" And because it was a public post, that's why I thought, well, in which case, other people might be interested in this too, because we're finding ourselves in a interesting time at the moment where it's kind of being posited. You can either train horses or you can have a relationship with them and you can care about their emotional well-being, but you can't really do the two, or it's very difficult to do the two. And I think there are quite a few people like myself who believe it is possible to do those two things alongside each other, and that actually it's something that people who have been interested in horses have been concerned about for um, hundreds of years. You know, if we look back to Xenophon, he was talking about it. But how do we do it? Like, and I think people were asking for some specifics around what did I mean around what cracks was I seeing and how had I been papering over them. And so what I'm not going to talk about tonight is is an approach to training, although usually that is what I talk about. And so that's why I thought this would be maybe interesting for some people, because one of the reasons I was so drawn to Philippe Carl specifically originally, and then the School of Legerté, is because of his desire to demystify horse training and to come up with a very logical, usable description of how do I train a horse. And I think most of you might be aware of the fact that I don't come from a horsey background. I have never ridden a dressage test in my life. I don't come from a horse training background at all. So everything I learned about training horses was from like ground zero, and I started doing that relatively late in life. Previous to that, I'd been enjoying hacking horses, and I'm really delighted to be able to share that logical approach with as many people who are interested, which is, you know, how do you train a horse and what is it that you need to train a horse if you want to ride them to stay as sound as possible? If you want to train them in a way that isn't reliant on bits of kit, that isn't reliant on force, that takes into account a horse's capacity to learn, and that really understands how they balance and how they move, that recognizes how a horse physically exists in the world without a person on board, and then uses that use that knowledge in order to be able to then train them in a compassionate way. And um, so that's a lot of what I have shared, and certainly those of you who might have read my book, that's what it's been about. Is, how do we train a horse, and what is it that we need to train a horse if we want to sit on them, or if we want to ask them to be in a domesticated human setting. But that's not what I'm going to talk about tonight. So I'm this evening going to talk more about, and what do we bring to the party as us, and how do we develop the capacity to move from just mechanical training, which actually, not, I don't want to say anybody can do, but a dedicated person can do. How do we take into account our horse's emotional well-being alongside that? How do we move from just caring about how a horse moves and what a horse can do and what a horse can understand to, and how do they feel about that? And is it possible to be able to train a horse to potentially a high level, according to whatever you might think a high level is, and still prioritize the relationship? Are those two things potential happy bedfellows? And for me, it's the most interesting bit of being with horses. Is that possible? So thank you for doing this, Shadow. I didn't quite expect so many people to turn up. Let's have a look then. I'm going to share this presentation, and I haven't done this before, and it might be of no interest to some of you because I've really tried to sit back and think, what is it that you see in some people that means they have an immediate okayness with a horse? And how can we develop that? And you can probably all think of some people, and they're not necessarily horse people, as in they're not necessarily super proficient or know a lot about horses or really experienced with horses, who bring with them a certain quality that a horse is drawn to. And I can think of two people in my own life, my friend Adam and my small friend Zia, who both bring qualities with them that mean that despite the fact that they are not horse trainers and they've never had horses of their own, and that they're not particularly interested in training horses, that they bring with them certain qualities that are appealing to a horse. And my belief is that if we are really interested and really care about this, that we can also develop these qualities, because I think they're in us anyway. I think it's more that they've been squashed out of us rather than that we don't naturally have them. And through a training system which is horse centric, understands how horses move, understands how horses learn, understand what a horse needs in order to be ridden, we can also work out how to train a horse. If you have questions, please don't stand on ceremony. Please put them in the chat, or unmute yourself and pipe up. That's absolutely fine as well. Right. I did ask the lady to record us, didn't I? Let's hope so. Okay, now I go through this endless battle every time with Canva where it would like to take my I'm just going to check I am recording, because a few people have said, please can you record? I think I am. Okay, so who is a horse? Oh, see, I told you Canva would do this. It's very naughty. And what matters to them? And it's really easy to spend a whole life with horses and never really consider this. We probably all know people that do that. It's very easy to spend a whole life using horses for our own purposes and not really think about what might be important to them. And that is above and beyond. I'm not going to be talking today about friends, freedom, and forage. So let's assume to a certain extent that we all believe that horses would benefit from friends, freedom, and forage. But what else? What else constitutes a good life for a horse? And this is Rural, the horse that I mentioned, my young Luso, who was started as a 3.5-year-old when I met him in Portugal. He's now 5 and a bit, having had this accident. And this is Rural doing one of his absolute favorite things, which is exploring the world. So if anybody else has any ideas about this, this is just my starter for 10 list. When I think about what really matters to a horse, we'll go through this. You just have to live with the fact that Canva is going to flip us backwards and forwards between slides in an erratic fashion, and there's nothing I can do about it. Right. So these are some of the things that I believe a horse needs and wants. Aside from, so I've put at the bottom there, having their basic needs met. That they would very much like to feel safe, that they desire extremely importantly to them to be connected to others, that it's on pain of death that they don't want to be connected, that they don't want to be by themselves. And this is where these 3 things, if we can use this knowledge to our advantage, they are hardwired to learn through interaction with the world. They come out of the womb experience expectant. So they are going to learn how to be a horse through interactions, not through doing nothing. And we're going to talk about this later, is that we may have found ourselves in a situation where we're so desirous of not being troublesome to a horse, of not causing horses worry, of not causing horses to feel overly pressurized or overwhelmed or over threshold, that we can end up doing very little with a horse, providing them with quite a small world to live in. And actually, a horse is going to learn how to be more horse-like through bumping into the world, through being posed questions by the world and finding answers to them. So those things, they would like to feel safe. It's very important to them. They need to feel connected, and they want to learn through experience with the world. Right, just look away while I pretend that didn't happen. Here we go. Right, and then who is a human and what matters to them? And I like this picture. Obviously, it's just it's a stock picture, but obviously the human is quite pleased with the prizes, and to me, it looks like the horse is giving them stink eye. We overtly, on the surface, can believe that we want different things, but actually, from my experience, and sorry, I'm kind of launched into this without any introduction about who I am, but I'm just assuming that if you've bothered to come here on a Thursday evening, you've got some idea of what you're in for. So my background is in the environment and in conservation work. And then I spent quite a long time in young people's mental health and around the fields of psychology and emotional well-being. I still do a small amount of lecturing at the University of Exeter around mental well-being, basically. I've been working with horses for about 20 years, part-time alongside that. And the more I understand about what kind of animal a human is, the more similar it is clear that we are. We are more similar than we are different. If anybody's looking for a juicy little read at the moment, I'm just reading an excellent book called The Arrogant Ape, which is about this concept of human exceptionalism, that we think that we are significantly different and better to all other animals and living beings on the planet. And the more open we become to that not being the truth, that actually we're different and that we're all brilliant in our own ways, but that we have our we have a lot of sharedness. So I'm sorry, I've seen some people have put a question in the chat. Thank you very much for everyone who's saying I'm definitely recording. Thank you. people who know me well. So if you really, really spend some time thinking about this one, I can't remember who first really opened my eyes to this, that we want the same things. We want to feel safe. We need to feel connected, and we learn through interaction with the world. The problem is, we think it's about stuff. We think that we are searching for the prize, the rosette, the trophy, the bigger house, the flashy car, uh, the Instagram life. We think it's about stuff, but actually we're searching for the feelings. We're searching to feel loved. We're searching to feel secure. We're searching to feel interested, curious about things. We've just gone on a wrong one somewhere along the line and have been led to believe that it's about acquisition. And horses don't have that. They don't need stuff. We might think they need stuff. I've just been lured into the world of getting Des a shiny saddlecloth. Don't think he gives a monkeys about the colours of his saddlecloth. I just am quite taken with it. But it's, if you really spend time thinking about this, how am I the same as my horse? And that when we strip back some of the things that we have been made to believe or come to believe, particularly in specific parts of the world, about it being about external acquisition of things, or external validation from others. We like other people to tell us that we're doing a good job. We like rosettes, all of that stuff. Actually, all of that is about the feelings on the inside. And that's exactly the same as for our horse. So, as I said to you, this is definitely not about training techniques. Hopefully, you're already getting the sense of that. So, you can just quietly dap out now if that's what you were hoping for. So, why is it that a horse might find us tricky to be around? And I guess what I would suggest to you is that you can be thinking about what the flip side of this might be. Possibly because, and there are many reasons that a horse might find us tricky to be around, but I'm going to assume that most people who are here are not beating their horses or shouting at their horses or doing terrible things to their horses. Most of us are probably really trying our best to do a good job by our horses. So we've probably already fallen into that camp where we're not, we're really trying to recognize, I want my horse to have an okay life. And yet it can still feel like, this isn't quite, I don't feel like this is quite going as I had hoped between me and this horse. And this was absolutely what I uncovered with Rural. And so anything that I share here is because I've experienced it, that this has been true for me. Humans are delightful story making creatures. We're really good at making stories. We've been doing it for thousands of years. Sharing stories verbally, writing stories down, sharing stories through art, sharing stories through music. It's what we do. Horses don't. And so we can bring things to the party that are just our imagination, that aren't necessarily true or helpful in that moment with the horse. And I feel like it's a constant job when we're trying to work out who our horse actually is and where I may have papered over cracks, where I may not be really seeing what's going on. I have to try to listen to what stories I'm telling. This is part of the human condition. We all are a sucker for this one, that we care too much about what others think, and that can get in the way too. A lot for horse people. I think one of the reasons that Zia is so excellent is she doesn't really care about what other people think. A couple of weeks ago, some people know her. She lives on the farm that I live on. She's a younger person. We went for a cream tea at this place called Bovey Castle, which is an incredibly posh, like private members club. And she was wearing her usual, well, we were both wearing our usual slightly bonkers farm clothing, that I'd kind of white jogger off my top. And I think she was wearing wellies and fingerless gloves. And when we went in and walked through the car park and it's all Daimlers and Rolls Royces, I just said, oh, see, I'm not sure if we can go here. Like, I'm not sure if this is going to be okay for us to go into the restaurant. And she said, why? And I said, what are other people going to think about us? And she said, I don't care what other people think about me. And I thought, oh yeah, there you go. So when she's with a horse, she's not thinking about what anybody else is considering in relation to what they're seeing between her and that horse. She's just honestly bringing herself to the table. This is a really hard one. This is really hard. We want our horse to show us and maybe other people how likable we are and how good we are. Like I said, I'm sharing these with you because I know them. I've also taught a lot of people over the years, and it's a really common one. I want my horse to show me that I'm likable. It's probably why all of us need a cat in our life, because they'll keep you grounded on that front, won't they? So all I'm saying, when we are gently leading ourselves through some of these things with our horses, is if I really want to see who my horse is and how they are experiencing this situation, can I just bring these things to the surface? Can I just have a little wonder about whether this might be getting in the way? And it absolutely was for me with Rural, and I didn't even really notice it. I had a story about I've bought this horse. We're going to crack on and do this training. He's old enough to get going. I didn't want to let other people down by not taking him along to the training course that I'm on. Of course, I wanted Rural to like me. Of course, I did. I still do. And then this one, and this is what I'm going to talk about and give you some ideas about this evening, is that we don't notice what's going on. That amongst all the other animals, we are the least good noticers. And that is a skill that we all can rediscover. It's a natural skill to us that's been lost or hidden or submerged. It's not something that we don't have. Right. Oh, hang on a second. Am I still screen sharing? We've suddenly gone out. Also, some humans aren't very good at Canva. Right, let's try this again. Okay. So, a couple of years ago, I did a master's degree at Schumacher College, which is a completely bonkers, but quite brilliant, very small university in a corner of Devon. And I loved it. It was called Mind Movement and Ecology, and it opened my eyes to so many things that I hadn't thought about. And as part of it, I read this book by a chap called Baptiste Moritz, and the book is called On Ways of Being Alive. And he is a wolf tracker. So his passion, like our passion is horses, his passion is wolves. And there's lots of people who are trying to kind of rediscover or rekindle the art of tracks and signs, of our ability to be able to read the landscape, to see what's going on there, to be able to understand who's been here before me, what happened here, what do I think might be about to happen next. And good horse people know how to read tracks and signs with horses. That's what they're able to do. What happened before what happened is that, basically. And so what he says, Baptiste Maurice, is that modern life has dulled us down to being aware, that we have been taught to stop being present in our environments, to sit on our sofa. I'm sitting on my sofa now. To sit on our sofa and order our food in, and we don't have to worry about danger. That's a real thing for him, that he says most danger has been taken away from humans in terms of within our immediate daily lives. So we've lost our powers of awareness. and this is, I don't know if you can read this, many of the techniques and functions of the modern world serve this purpose: to dispense with attention, to be able to operate anywhere in any place despite one's ignorance, quite carelessly. And I think the thing that I'm so grateful for from A Life with Horses is that if you want to, they can help re-aliven that in you. They can help you bring your senses back online. And that's how I think you can start to find this magic point between logical training, a system of training where you teach a horse how to balance, how to be symmetrical, how to be light, how to understand the aids, and you are weaving into that. How does this horse feel about this? Does it have good feeling built in? So, what I'm going to suggest this evening is some ways that you might, if you're interested, start to reawaken your own powers of attention paying, because that's what we need to do if we want to be somebody that's really useful to a horse. So, you can choose whatever you would like to do. But I would suggest that if you would like to reawaken your powers of awareness, that you make it a practice, that you actually decide, my horse would appreciate it if I was more aware. They definitely, definitely would. We're going through a life in a treacle as far as they're concerned. I choose being in the natural world to see if I can rediscover my powers of awareness. So this morning, before I started work, I took Rural for his hand walk. When I first had Rural, I used to walk and have a podcast playing on my phone. Now, I might be massively anthropomorphizing, but he would bump my pocket with the phone in, and I would turn the phone off and he wouldn't do it. So all I know is I don't, when I walk Rural out in hand now, I do not have anything playing, and I try to use it as an opportunity to develop the same level of awareness that that horse is going to have. That I'm looking for changing surfaces on the road. I'm noticing where there is shadow and light in the hedgerows. I'm paying attention to what I can hear. I'm paying attention to what I can smell. I'm thinking about how things have changed from when we walked along that lane yesterday, because I know my horse will be doing it, or should be doing it if there's enough horse left in the horse. And the skills that I can then, if that is my practiced way of being, when I then come to training my horse, I am already bringing back online those skills of tracking, of signs reading, of being able to see what happened before what happened without needing to know the story about it. I can feel it. You can become aware of it through what the horse is telling you. And it starts to give me ideas about what I might need to do next. It's through this reawakening our powers of awareness that we can do this. Let's just go backwards and forwards endlessly, Canva. I'd love that. How else can we practice? Because you might not be out in nature on a daily basis. Most of us are pretty fortunate to do that if we've got horses, but also we can practice with humans, because we're terrible at reading what's going on with other people, particularly in this social media world where we are led to believe that somebody else's outsides should be compared to my insides. That what other people are presenting, myself included, are on social media, is the truth of who they are on the inside. And of course, it's not. But even when we know that cognitively, it's really hard to believe it and to practice it. As part of my previous existence working with young people with mental health issues, I also spent quite a lot of time working with young people with profound and multiple learning disabilities. And I did this amazing training called person-centered practice, when you would try to through observing somebody's behavior, understand what was important to them and what was important for them. And as we are all animals, that is exactly the same skill that we are trying to bring to our horses. What's important for a horse is going to be the basic needs met. You know, are they getting friends? Are they getting freedom? Are they getting forage? What's important to them, you are going to learn through observing who that horse is. And something that we were told as part of that training, so if you were to practice this with people, when somebody's words differ from their behavior, believe their behavior. That is an excellent dating tip to anybody out there. But it's really easy for us to go through life not considering what it might be like to be in somebody else's skin, how somebody else might be viewing the world, how somebody else might be receiving the world, and that the way that they present themselves may not be what's going on in the inside of them, very rarely. And I think we can develop, because I work with so many people as riders, when I'm working with a horse and a rider, I'm having to do that dually. Okay, who's this person and what's going on for them? Who's this horse and what's going on for them? And then how could I adapt my training for both of them to try to help them move forward? And that isn't, for people, very often what we want is to have our ego smoothed and to be told that we're brilliant. Of course, we all love that. Absolutely, I do. But if we really want to learn, if we think back to that, us and horses come out of the womb experienced, expectant, that means rubbing up against the world. If we want to learn, it's about scratching at what's going on beneath the surface and then working out, okay, is this helpful for me or not? So, can I imagine what it's like to be somebody else? It's a really interesting question, because as humans, you know, we're all narcissists to an extent. This whole thing about, well, they're a narcissist, we've all got narcissistic traits. Nobody to quite the same extent that a cat has, but we're all so in our own heads and considering how things are for us. You know, you go to a clinic, the most important thing for every single person there is themselves and their horse. It's really difficult to think about what's going on for other people too, particularly when we're stressed. So that's why we need to practice these things when we're not stressed, because these skills that we can develop will help us to be able to step back and consider what is it like to be a horse? So there's a very famous essay called What Is It Like to Be a Bat by a chap called Thomas Nagel. He was writing about the nature of consciousness, and it's quite difficult to read. I have to say, it's not light reading, but it's a very famous, I think, Kickstarter for a lot of modern understanding around ethology, animal behavior, animal ways of being. Because what he says essentially is, I can imagine what it would be like for me to be a bat. I can imagine what it would be like for me to have webbed hands. I can imagine what it would be like for me to echolocate. I can't really imagine the essence of being a bat. And that's going to be true for us as a horse as well, that I'm only ever going to be able to imagine what it would be like for me to be a horse. I'm not going to really be able to understand what it is like to be a horse. But even if we were to try to do that, if we were to just try to put ourselves, considering what we know about what kind of animal a horse is, how they see, how they hear, how they move, how they experience the world, if I were to just stand back and think about that, the next time I lead my horse into the arena, if I just stood for a minute and thought about, if I was a prey animal that typically uses flight, that has wide monocular vision, that has excellent hearing, that struggles to adapt between light and dark very quickly, that has an exceptionally fast reaction time, how might I the best of it being that it's going to be me imagining how it would be to be a horse. How might I be experiencing this situation? So I hope that that makes a little bit of sense in terms of him saying, you're never really going to know what it's like to be a horse. But if you were to just even step back and try to imagine, if I, with all the knowledge that I have of horsiness, what might this experience be like for me as a horse? And I try to do the same for people, particularly when I'm finding a person difficult. When I'm finding myself rubbing up against a person, as long as I have got a bit of space to do it, I try to stand back and think, what might it be like to be them? How might they be experiencing this situation? How might they be receiving this information? And could I believe their behavior rather than their words? With horses, we've only got their behavior, happily. That's why they're so much easier in some respects to work with than people. So, as I said, tonight I'm not talking about the techniques of training. Um, I usually do, but someone with this horse sense can bring something useful to pretty much any training system. Now, of course, we're going to exclude some training systems that use brutal equipment and vast amounts of force and aggression. But if we're in the kind of what might be ethical training systems, lots of the different classical training systems, some people using positive reinforcement, some people using negative reinforcement, people such as myself who are kind of really interested in the feel-based side of things, that actually most of those systems can bring something useful to the horse if we can think about the feeling that we are bringing to this. Horses are amazing. They're amazingly adaptable. They're really up for giving things a go. You could look at a horse in one classical training system that's had quite different approaches to, say, the one that I train in. And the horses are working it out on both in both schools. It's fine. The horses are having an okay time. They're moving in a nice enough way, all of that stuff. But where you get brilliance, or where you get to see that really harmonious relationship, or where it feels like there is that extra bit of something lovely, is usually because the human is paying attention to how the horse really feels about this, and they are considering what they're bringing to the party. They're not just thinking about what the horse can do for them. They're not just thinking about what they can train the horse to do, or what it is that they might like to use that horse for. They're also really thinking about, who am I, and would I like to be around me if I was a horse, and if I'm um if I'm concerned about that, what am I going to do about it? So, like I said here, there's a lot of talk these days. I mean, if people who've been riding in the Ray Hunt tradition and further back from that will have been talking about this for years, that we would like our horses to pay attention to us, that we talk about, where is our horse's attention. For those of you who've spent time in the membership group, you'll have heard me talk a lot about Dr. Deb's writing about the birdie theory. She actually got it from a chap called Harry Whitney. But the idea that all animals have a point of focus that is like a little bird that flutters around their forehead, and that we feel the very best when the birdie is right here in the center of our third eye, whatever you might like to call it. And that when our birdie gets disconnected from our body, separation anxiety would be a classic example of this for a horse. Your horse has left their birdie with their friends and you've taken their body to the arena, that it feels extremely distressing to them, and they will try whatever they can to bring together their birdie and their body. We're the same. When we are fully focused on the thing that we are doing, and we're not thinking about something in the past, worrying about something in the future, considering what other people are thinking of us, planning our next meal, when we are in that state of flow where our birdie and our body are together, that's when we feel the best. And so quite a lot of trainers are talking about this. Where is my horse's attention? Can I direct my horse's thoughts? Do I know what my horse is paying attention to? And yet, sometimes we're not thinking enough about, am I somebody that my horse would like to pay attention to? And what I believe is that horses are incredibly generous and they're really up for paying attention to people. You don't need to be a perfect human being. You don't need to have everything sorted. You don't even need to know loads, like I was saying about Zia, but they do require us to pay attention to ourselves if we are going to be concerned about their emotional well-being. And I think something that horses can really struggle with is when our insides and our outsides don't match. When we've got something going on the inside and we're presenting something different on the outside, because horses will read behavior over what someone is saying. And I love this. I don't feel despondent about this. I think, the purpose of Earth School is to try to work out how to be a good human being, and horses offer us that possibility. Canva, on the other hand, could make you a very frustrated human being. Right, this is something somebody said to me the other day. I think it was in The Art of Hacking. And I thought, that is genius. She said that she decided to ask herself, if I was my horse, how would I like to be asked? So in all the things that we're talking about when we're training a horse, which, as in if you train in the School of Leger, we'll be talking a lot about balance, mobility, flexibility, understanding of the aids, relaxation, balance, impulsion. If you're training in a different school, you might have other things that you're thinking about. But if we sat alongside each of those, if I was my horse, how would I like to be asked? And if we are paying attention, we'll work out that different horses like to be asked in different ways, that there is not going to be a one size fits all. Like us, some people like a lot of time. Some people like to be posed a complex puzzle they have to work out for themselves. Some people would just like to be given a couple of choices and work that out. It's why horses are so endlessly interesting, because they're not the same. And then this one, I try to go around and around, particularly when I'm getting into a kerfuddle with my horse. If I was my horse, would I understand what was being asked? If you could take away one thing from this evening, that might be a really good one. The next time you ask your horse a question, and that's going to be when you walk across the field towards them, when you put their halter on, when you lead them back, when you pick up their feet, when you ask them to do a half pass, when you ask them to go over a jump. If I was my horse, would I understand the question? Because the thing we need to remind ourselves about is that the question is in our head, and we have to find a somatic, a body-based way of explaining that to our horse. The horse doesn't know what a 20-meter circle is. The horse doesn't know what a shoulder in is. The horse doesn't know what a levade is. The horse doesn't know what going around a gate is. Although that one might be more obvious to them, actually, because that one has probably got the most explicit. Oh, sorry, I was trying to let somebody in and it went. Has probably got the most explicit explanation for the horse going around a gate. They don't require the human to be quite so good at explaining that, because very often they can work that out for themselves. But all those other things I just described is a picture in our head. I have a picture of a half pass. I'm going to teach you the aids, and then I'm going to try to put those aids together. If I was my horse, would I understand what that picture was? So every single time you come to your horse, for me, it's a really useful reminder that I'm trying to turn a human imagining into a horse physical understanding. Is it okay to ask a horse difficult questions? And are the non-negotiables? These are some pictures of my horse that I got given 4.5 months ago now. This is Capri, the Lipizzaner that some of you may have heard of. This went on like this for about a month. So I wasn't intending to ask Capri difficult questions. I was trying to lead him. or ask him to go round me in walk on a circle. These were the replies that he was giving me. So it's probably fairly clear how he felt about those questions, but it was really dangerous, really, really dangerous, and horrible for him and horrible for me. I couldn't help but ask him difficult questions because he wasn't equipped when he came here. He didn't have the skills to be able to fill in anything. He'd left a home that he felt very secure in with a person that he knew very well and a horse that he knew very well. And it was a very small environment. So from the moment he stepped off the lorry, I was asking him difficult questions. And I had to explain to him really rapidly that there were non-negotiables. If I was going to be able to lead him out to the field, which he would like to go out to the field, he can't be leading like this. That is a non-negotiable. I have to walk up the lane, go through 6 gates. I'm leading another horse. But this is what I believe, that it's okay to ask a horse difficult questions. And it's okay to explain that there are things which are non-negotiable if we are considering, if I was this horse, how would I like to be asked? And if I was this horse, could I understand the question? And this is something that Karen Mousson said to me a long time ago. If you don't know Karen Mousson, look her up. She's amazing. Which is that if you just brought this sentence to your interaction with a horse, can you let me help you with that? It really changes how the horse receives what can be a difficult conversation. I'm still sometimes having difficult conversations with Capri. He still can be very explosive and very worried. And because of the level that he will take these things to, I am having to match it with a level of clarity that I haven't had to use with many other horses, certainly not any of my own. But I really try to keep this feeling in me of, let me help you with that. Not, you're in trouble, not, don't do that, not, oh, bloody horse. I mean, not that I don't have those thoughts occasionally. He can be quite a wearing horse to be around, but I really try to hang on to that expression of, let me help you with that. And I genuinely believe, and if you think about all the situations we might find ourselves in, going to the doctor, going to the dentist, seeing your mechanic when they've got a massive bill for you. There are a lot, I'm being facetious, but there are lots of situations we might find ourselves in that feel very uncomfortable. It's not a nice question. I wouldn't choose to be in this situation, having this medical procedure, but that the intention that the person brings, when it has that feeling of, could I just support you through this, is very different than when somebody is irritated with you and trying to hustle you through it and just get it done, and you know that you're a pain in the backside. I think horses have as complex an emotional life as we do, if not more complex. Why would they not be able to experience that same thing too? Oh, Canva. Right, so we'll finally get to why I was asked to do this, which is about rural. Don't worry, we haven't got long. I've only got a few more slides. So the horse on the left-hand side is the rural that I met in Portugal. And he was 3.5 with a haircut done by his mum and a bowl in that photograph, isn't he? But you can see there that he's quite a worried chap. There are some clear indicators of the fact that this horse is quite worried. The big one for me is if you look at his parrot lip, his top lip is sticking a long way over his bottom lip, and his eyebrows are extremely peaked. So, and this is what I saw in Portugal, was he was a very good boy, didn't put a foot wrong. But I knew then, oh, this horse is quite worried about some stuff here. And also you can kind of see in some of the angles of his body. This picture is of not of Portugal, definitely of Dartmoor. I think Rural had been here for about 6 weeks at this point, and hopefully you can already see I had discovered something that gave Rural deep joy, and that his body is looking softer, and it might be difficult to see on this photograph, but his expression changed inordinately. And the thing that I discovered that he loved was going out and about. Me on foot, with a halter on. So I already started to get a sense of, okay, this is a different horse. I've seen some people have just put some things in the chat, so just have a look at that. Oh, so what was the name of the surname? Yeah, Caramuson. Thanks, Fiona. You can um look her up. I think she's still, if you put in Caramuson on the art of riding on YouTube, there's some very interesting videos on there. Julie's saying my biggest aha moment was when I realized my horses just don't know. Yeah, absolutely. So then what happened is Rural had an accident. So when he arrived back from, if we go back to this one, when he came over from Portugal, I relatively quickly, we had a few things I bumped up against. As some of you know, he expressed some feelings about being ridden that I was a bit surprised about. So he was quite bucky, but I worked through it, got the job done, carried on riding, took him to a couple of clinics with my teacher, Sylvia Stossel. All good, feeling like this is going pretty well. And then one day he came in from the field extremely ataxic in his movement. So walking sideways, couldn't really work out which leg he was lame on, and holding his neck off to one side. And it turned out he'd had an accident in the field, and he's chipped his cervical vertebrae and damaged the brachial tendon in his shoulder. So he's had a long period of time off doing anything which looks like training. He's done a lot of hanging around in the field. He's had lots of body work, and he's done lots of walking out because he loves walking out. So then I started to bring him back into what you might consider training. Started to do a bit of in-hand work, started to do a bit of lunging. And that's when I realized, do you know what? I have been papering over some cracks. I have been living with some things that maybe don't feel brilliant to this horse, but that we're getting by with. And these were some things I realized that I was going to have to sit with. If I wanted to peel back what was underneath those cracks and see what was really going on for this horse. So I had to sit with the fact that it's likely that I'm going to expose some cognitive dissonance in myself, that I am going to realize that there are some things I'm really holding on to because I want them to be true, even if they're not really true. You know, we see it everywhere. It's a human trait, isn't it? Is that I want this thing to be true, so I'm going to believe it's going to be true. So I'm going to have to live with the fact that that's probably going on for me. So how can I keep checking that in? If I really want to care about my horse's emotional well-being, I'm going to have to keep thinking about the fact that I may have wants which don't match my horse's. I have finally come to terms with the fact that despite getting a bloody great credit card to put a trailer on, if Des could choose, he'd go in a very nice lorry with his friend with him, please. He doesn't really love going in it. I'm talking about Des instead of Rural now, but that he doesn't really love going in the trailer. He absolutely will do it, and he'll do it by himself, and he won't complain. But if I really read what he's telling me, he's pretty clear that he would rather I hired the lady with the 80 grand lorry and I could put his friend in, and he'd enjoy that a lot more. I may have a story that I'm telling that I would like Rural to fit into. This is my story. I've bought myself a young horse from Portugal. He's going to be my next horse to take over from Des. This is our linear training progression. This is what we're going to do. These are the things I'm going to take him to. Already, obviously, that's gone sideways. But very quickly, I could feel as I'm starting to see him get a bit better that narrative has kicked in again. And that's where I thought, no, hang on, you have to stop now. If you really care about your horse's emotional well-being, can I really try to expose what my narratives are and not kick myself up the arse for them because I'm just a human, but really see what they are and then just lay it open on the table. That doesn't mean that I'm going to say that they're terrible and I can't have my own wants and desires and my own story about how I think things should be. But I need to keep setting them aside while I try to see what's going on for my horse. And I 100, a bazillion, a million% will make mistakes. And I think the thing that I see getting in the way of students more than anything else is this dislike of making mistakes. I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to feel like I've got things wrong. I want things to be perfect. I want things to be seen to be perfect by others and my horse. And it will stop you learning because learning is not about perfection. And relationships, I'm over what I said on that word, so I can't actually see what I've said there. Relationships are something, let's see if I can move myself, are messy. If you think about your best relationships, the ones that have lasted the longest and that are the most robust and that you appreciate the most, they pretty much are not the ones that have never had any trouble in them. So we have to kind of double down into the trouble a bit because I think about the people I've been friends with since I was 13. We have argued, we've misunderstood each other, we've miscommunicated things, we've disliked each other sometimes, but we've always loved each other. That's why they're still my friends. And I think that can be true with horses as well, is that it doesn't have to be plain sailing for everything to be okay. And what I try to think about when I'm in this situation that I'm in now with rural, where we're kind of coming back online and I'm trying to find out what cracks might have papered over, is that my horse is going to show me these things. They're going to show me something that they've learned, something that somebody has intentionally set out to teach them, or something that they've been taught not necessarily by somebody intending to teach them that. But that what they're exposing to you is, I learned this. Whether a person meant for me to learn it or not, I've learned it. Something that they're confused about, something that they're finding physically difficult or that is physically uncomfortable, or what they feel good about. And that it's my job to try to make sense of this. And if I can be interested in this and not take it personally and not get bound up in my own stuff, it's fascinating. For me, anyway, and I think for a lot of you, rather than it needing to be about how I want things to be. If you can get interested in this, bringing all your skills of awareness, your attention paying, your believing behavior, you can learn a lot about a horse. Because what I discovered about rural was that in some situations, I was living with his obedience. And it became really clear to me because when I took him out and about in hand like this, he is the most joyful, curious, interactive. Look at this. No, but look at this. Wants to scent track things. Then when we'd get in the school, he would become a much quieter version of himself. A good boy. After we'd got through the bucking stuff, not really giving me any trouble, but indicating to me, if I really paid attention to it, that he was being obedient. He wasn't necessarily feeling brilliant about it. So what I've started to do is to run a series of experiments using techniques to see if I can change how he feels about this. And tonight is not the time to talk about all of those different experiments. It would be impossible. But that's what I'm doing, is I'm trying to notice where I have been papering over cracks. These are 3 places. So when it came to picking out his feet, it was absolutely fine. Most people wouldn't even notice. I don't mean to sound that. It looked fine. It was very obedient. He did it. But I knew, particularly about his back feet, that there was just some old residue in there of not 100% feeling okay about it. And when he came, I had to rope him to get his feet picked up because he'd had quite a lot of physical levering of getting feet off the ground, and I just wasn't strong enough to do it. What I have now discovered is through working through this with him, I can just touch him with my fingertip and he'll pick up his feet. But I was living with something that was good enough for quite a long time because it got the job done. But I knew really that there was something in there that didn't feel great to rural. I am going back around the wheel of putting the saddle on. Now, again, it looks completely fine. You can stand with him free, with nothing on his head, and he'll let you put the saddle on. But I know because of the way that he takes the first step after you've put the saddle on, that there's some tightness in there. So I'm looking at that now, is in this time that I've got where I've no longer got any kind of pressure or story because Rural's knocked it out the water about how things should be, what progress we should have made. I'm now trying to understand, what could I do that could help Rural feel better about this? And then the big one is lunging, particularly with the Cavesson, where he goes ever so slightly into robot horse mode. It looks very sweet. You've probably seen some videos or maybe even seen it in real life. Rural's lunging looks neat now. It's pretty nice. But I know, because of his expression, that there's a bit of the lights going off. So again, I'm just using some explorations to see if I could at least move a little bit closer towards the horse that I see when I'm out and about, that is a joyful, curious, connected kind of a horse. Because what I've discovered is that he is way, 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 way more sensitive than I realized. Way more sensitive. He can come across, and if you've come up and had groundwork lessons with any of my horses, as being a bit dull on the ground. And actually, the more I'm exploring this, the more I'm realizing that was just a defense mechanism. He is incredibly sensitive, but he has learned a way of slightly armor plating himself that would be fine. It would get him through life. It did get him through life, but it's not really how I want him to feel about it. I like him a lot. I consider him to be a good friend. So I'm going back now to see if we can discover a better agreement. This is as close as I'm going to get this evening to talking to you about technique, because look, I've already gone 3 minutes over my promised time. This is what I do. I try something that I have some skill around, or I know a bit of technique around. And you might need to go off and learn some techniques and learn some skills. You can't just start with good intentions and observation and awareness. You also do need to learn some techniques and some skills. It's why we need mentors who can show us that stuff. We need to learn our scales. But then what I'm really, really, really doing is observing, what does he do? And how do I think he feels? With that caveat that I will never really know what it's like to be rural. I'm always going to be guessing, what is it like to be a bat? We never really know, but I can try. And then this was something that when I was doing that person-centered training that I talked about, working with young people with profound disabilities, that the facilitators were suggesting that you've really thought about how you felt. How does it make me feel? Because you can learn a lot from that in a reciprocal system. So I tried to observe, what did he actually do? And how do I think he felt? And then I tried to observe, what did I do? And rather than going into my thinking narrative, I try to grab a hold of, and how did it make me feel? And then I try to notice what changed, what didn't change, and then what am I going to do next? And that might lead me to think, I need to learn a different skill. I need to get slightly more refined in this technique. I need to try this again and see if my timing can be a bit better. I need to try it again and see if he can come up with a different answer. People who are training horses for a living, this is usually what they're doing. It's just they might not necessarily explain to you that that's what they're doing. And this, I think, is where we can move from, did the horse do the thing that I asked him to do, which is what Rural was doing. He was an obedient horse. And then adding in, how did the horse feel about the thing that I was asking him to do? That's where I think there is potentially this holy grail of a brilliantly trained horse who feels really good about what he's being asked to do. So you can apply this to any approach to training. And what it might lead you to is realizing, I don't think this approach to training is really in my horse's favor. I need to go away and find a different way. So to try to keep to my promise. Oh, this one. I squeezed this in at the last minute because I was listening to a lady called Martha Beck this morning, who's a life coach. And this is what she said, and I love it. She said, when she's coaching people, she says to them, tell me where I'm wrong. And that if we could ask that of our horse bravely, because none of us want to hear where we're wrong, but she's like, if you can allow that vulnerability to say to your horse, which is what I've been trying to do with Rural, tell me where I've been missing stuff. Tell me where I'm getting this wrong, Rural. Doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It doesn't mean I intentionally set out to do things in a horrible fashion, but it gives me so much more information about how I can improve the situation. And what I see from horses over and over again is there is always the possibility for reparation. They're really up for giving things another go. They're so generous on that front. So if we can be brave enough to ask that question, and it's probably a job to be done without anybody else watching, just you and your horse. Okay, horse, tell me where I'm getting this wrong. Tell me what you don't understand. Tell me where I'm confusing you. If I was you, could I understand the question that I'm asking you? What might that show you? And might that allow you to try something different, offer a different feeling, go and look for a different technique, check out what's the feeling in me that might not be the best feeling from the horse. That's why I think so many of us are drawn to horses, is it's not really about winning the rosettes and the trophies. Maybe for some of us it is, but it's because of that the feeling on the inside that we're searching for, of being connected, of feeling safe, of being valued, of being part of something with somebody else. And we might believe it's about that other stuff, but really horses show us that it's not. So I just thought I'd finish with a little video of Rural out this morning with his happy face on. Hasn't done his hair though, has he? Look at that. But this is who I know he is. And so I'm trying to find the ways that I can keep that horse in everything else that we do. So that is the end. Obviously it's recorded, so you can come back to this and listen to it or watch it again if you'd like to in the future. I'm aware that it's a bit esoteric. I hope it wasn't too esoteric. Because there's not loads of stuff about techniques, but if you go back to what I started about, which was that, how can you practice, reawaken your skills of awareness? How can you become a tracker and sign reader for horses? That's what will lead you to the gold, I think. So excellent. Thank you very much. Well, I'm really pleased that some people are interested in this. It's my great passion, and it's what keeps me going in the morning. Yeah, before I get up and muck out. So thanks very much, everybody. It was lovely to see you all. And yeah, hopefully see some of you again at some point. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kate.